Hello, I'd like to talk to you about the five forces framework to sustainable industry profit. Number one, how much competition is there in your industry? How much rivalry? Well, this has a positive effect in the sense of if there's a lot more rivalry, firms that compete with other firms that are very competitive, such as sports teams that compete with other competitive sports teams, tend to become very good. On the negative side, if you're facing a lot of really good competitors out there, it's a lot harder for you to make a profit. So a lot of times firms try to make it harder for other firms to compete against them. Now in the long run, that actually often will hurt them as as firms come from other countries or other parts of your own country. It makes it really hard to compete. And so here, that so in this case, the more competition. Let's call that competition. If competition uh, goes down, at least in the short run, it tends to make you more profits. Now, in the long run, profit tends to go up. But in the long run, we see a lot of industries where they're not able to compete anymore because, yeah, they reduce their competition. They kind of work together, saying, let's not compete too hard. We can share these profits. But it made it a lot harder to compete in the long term. And so some of the things you need to consider in terms of uh, profits. Monopolies. That's right. Monopolies tend to make more profits. Perfectly competitive industries for farms, often we would expect to make less profits. Another case of profits, differentiated products. Monopoly would be a case of really differentiated products. Another case would be uh, government restraints on competition, saying we're not going to allow you to compete in a certain way, and in that case, it might reduce rivalry. If you're the firm who can bring new technology, let's say there's new technologies that you're the firm that can bring to market first, well, that's going to that should increase your profits. However, that also may make the market more competitive. So it could go the other way. How's that for competition? Now, if the other firms are the ones who bring those new technologies that lower your cost to market first, well, that could increase competition, but reduce your profits. So it's a competitive struggle out there. You want to bring your products to market uh, most competitive way possible. At least that helps consumers. Number two, let's talk about threats of entry by new competitors. Well, if new firms can enter at ease, let's say, let me back up a second. I just get choked up so much when I talk about economics. Let's say you're making economic profits. Other firms see that. Kind of like, let's say you're the gold industry and people see that you're becoming a multi-millionaire. And they say, I want to do that too. So what do? They try to enter your industry, try to do what you're doing. Well, if they enter your industry, what does that do to your profits? Your profits go down. And so firms often like to make it more costly for other firms to enter, or if they are in the industry, let me make it easy for you to leave because I want to have more money. Well, a lot of things can do that. Patents, copyrights, public franchises. Public franchise would be like the cable company or the electric utility. And if you have easy entry, it tends to make a market more competitive. And but things that make it harder to enter would be product uh, differentiation, which may make it so it's harder to get customers. Differentiation may also make it easier to get a niche market. If it's hard to get access to distribution, it might be hard to enter. Or if the industry is constantly changing, well, that can make it easier to enter or harder to enter. Network effects. If people aren't very willing to switch out of their current network of software or whatever it is, may make it harder to enter. Economies of scale. If you have to have huge capital investments or huge output. If I'm going to start a car company, I think I'll wait a while because I just don't have a few $1 billion to spend to start my own car company. Oh well. Okay, let's talk about number 3, threat of substitute products or services. Well, if they're substitute products of services, having close substitutes such as imperfect competition increases the customer's ability to switch. I raise my price by a few cents, I lose all my customers. Well, this part could actually go into 1, intensity of competition. If there's perfect substitutes, there's more intense competition. But the case of 3 where it's different than 1 would be the case where it's something outside my industry. Such as, let's say, if you look at the history of business, you used to have very different businesses 100 years ago than you do today. And so you had the tanning industry used to be huge in the 1800s. Well, now we have synthetics, fabrics, and plastics. And so the tanning industry is tiny relative to what it was. Autos, well, once you've built the interstate system, trucks became much more competitive as a substitute. And so railroads just plummeted in size. Right? They're making a comeback now, but a lot of that was also how they were being managed in different regulations. But also part of it was Texas. You had the Texas Railroad Commission that tried to reduce competition with trucks. It's kind of interesting in a lot of these cases where firms try to reduce the ability of substitutes to compete, such as the case of video VHS machines in terms of watching movies. Hollywood thought this is going to destroy movie theaters, and it is definitely a substitute for movie theaters. Probably did reduce the number of people going to theaters. But also for Hollywood, it was a wonderful opportunity because it now gave them new outlets. And so was it a substitute or was it a complement? Yes, it was a substitute for, you could watch, it was easier to watch old movies, but on the other side, it made it so that it gave new distribution channels. And so it's often difficult to know, whether you're going to be using something as a substitute for your good or actually it becomes a great opportunity for you to make new sales. And so some big questions there. Complements, if a complement lowers its price. So, for example, if you're in the baking industry making hot dog buns and all of a sudden their sales in terms of hot dogs or hot dog prices keep low, people might eat them more often and increases the demand for your product. And so you need to consider what are some of the other goods out there that are people tend to buy together with your product. And likewise, some of those may be government regulations where they say, okay, if you buy this one product, you need to buy another product with it, such as auto insurance. Number 4, bargaining power of consumers or buyers. Well, if consumers have more bargaining power, it's harder to make a profit. If you have only one buyer, Walmart has a lot of pressure that they can put on suppliers because of their bargaining power. And so in this case, if buyers are not concentrated and don't have large volume, it's easier to compete. Likewise in public health systems in Europe and other countries, where it's much easier for that public health system to compete because you basically have one market or sometimes for healthcare, such as in England. That can be positive or negative. One healthcare supplier who was in England decided to come to the United States because he said, well, if the current government wants to buy my product, that's probably pretty good. But what happens when they switch and say, hey, we don't want your product anymore? I might be out of there, and I might not have the political power or political lobbying ability to say, yeah, we'll stay with you. And so that bargaining power of buyers is very important. And a lot of that also has to do with government regulations. And, it helps to be more profitable when buyers are not very price sensitive. Products are unique. Buyers don't have good information. And that's one of the problems with the internet is buyers get more information. They're able to negotiate more competitively. So in fact, when there's better information, just advertising, ads, tends to make markets more competitive. Bargaining power of suppliers. Actually, and under here I put more detailed material, but bargaining power of suppliers. Firms tend to make higher profits when there are many substitutes. And so if you have a supplier, and let me draw here's my supplier, and he's my only one. Well, that's going to make it much harder for me to make a profit because he can increase the prices to me versus if I have lots of people like him, and it makes it a lot easier. It's nice to have various substitutes in terms of the different suppliers. I want for me, I want to have that bargaining power of a buyer. I want to be able to compete among very many different people in terms of the labor, material components, which is one of the reasons, if there's only one buyer, one seller, it makes it really hard to compete. And so it's hard. Consider how many substitutes are out here. In fact, I paused here again because there are all these words I could choose from. I could substitute between words. Made my brain much more competitive. Okay, well, maybe that may not be the best analogy, but hopefully these three guys right here show that substitute shows up in each one of these cases. Is it unique? Well, if it's unique, well then, if I'm the owner of that unique thing that's being sold, I'm in a much better position. If people can copy it, or I'm the buyer, I'm in a much less competitive position. Well, good luck making profits.